The cursor blinked mockingly on the blank screen of the job application portal. Leo Martinez leaned back in his worn desk chair, the familiar frustration churning in his gut, mingling unpleasantly with the lingering anxiety of the past 2 months. Getting laid off from his graphic design position at a mid-sized Phoenix marketing firm had been a blow, attributed to restructuring, but feeling suspiciously personal, after he'd subtly pushed back against a particularly inept manager. Now, at 26, navigating the competitive job market felt like wading through treacle. Each rejected application, each unanswered email, deepening the sense of precariousness that always seemed to shadow his steps, a shadow cast largely by his own family. He glanced around his small, functional apartment in a less fashionable part of Phoenix. It was tidy, paid for by his own hard work, yet it felt perpetually temporary, lacking the easy comfort and assumed stability that defined the lives of his parents, Robert and Isabella Martinez, and especially his older sister, Sophia. The layoff wasn't just a career setback. It was ammunition for the family narrative that had dogged him his entire life. Leo, the sensitive, slightly unreliable one, always struggling, always needing a bit more time to figure things out, unlike the effortlessly successful Sophia, or the ultimate benchmark, his mother's brother, the formidable Uncle Mike Rossi. The phone call informing his parents about the layoff 2 months ago had gone exactly as expected. His father, Robert, a man whose own career had plateaued decades ago in a municipal planning office, launched into a familiar lecture. Graphic design? See, Leo, I told you! Should have learned a trade. Something solid like plumbing, like your cousin Ricky. Always have work then. His mother, Isabella, bypassed criticism for cloying, anxious concern that somehow felt worse. Oh, Leonardo, are you sure you will be all right? Your rent is so high there. You know you can always come home if things get too difficult, she'd said, her voice laced with the implicit message that his failure was inevitable, his return to their orbit expected. Then came the unavoidable comparison. Your Uncle Mike never had these struggles. Even Sophia landed that management traineeship right out of college. Leo had gritted his teeth, murmuring reassurances he didn't feel, cutting the call short before the negativity completely suffocated him. Their lack of faith wasn't surprising. It was the wallpaper of his existence. He was the scapegoat, the one whose minor stumbles were magnified, whose successes, like graduating college with honors despite working 2 jobs, were minimized or ignored, all serving to highlight the perceived virtues of the golden children, the ever-promising but rarely delivering Sophia, and the unassailable Uncle Mike. The successful businessman brother Isabella constantly held up as the standard Leo could never reach. Frustrated with the fruitless online job hunt, Leo found himself pacing his small living room, eventually stopping in front of a sturdy cardboard box tucked away in a closet corner. It was filled with old papers he'd brought from his parents' attic months ago during a visit, intending to sort through them. He hadn't planned on tackling it now, but the need for any kind of productive action, any distraction from the blinking cursor, spurred him on. He pulled the box out, sat on the floor, and started sifting through old school projects, forgotten letters, and dusty photo albums. Beneath a stack of his own childhood drawings, his fingers brushed against a thick, slightly yellowed manila folder labeled simply, Grandpa Ruiz, Personal. His mother's father, a sharp, kind man who'd run a small but successful hardware store and always had a quiet word of encouragement for Leo, had passed away nearly 3 years ago. Curious, Leo opened the folder. Inside were old bank statements, property deeds, and a copy of Grandpa Ruiz's last will and testament. Leo remembered the reading of the will vaguely. A straightforward affair where the modest estate was divided equally between his mother, Isabella, and her 2 siblings, the formidable Mike Rossi and their younger sister, Elena Garcia, who lived out of state in California. But tucked behind the main will document was something else. A thinner, folded sheaf of papers stapled together, clearly marked Codicil to Last Will and Testament of Manuel Ruiz. Dated just 6 months before his grandfather passed away, Leo unfolded it carefully. It was drafted by his grandfather's longtime attorney, properly signed and witnessed. It contained one crucial amendment to the original will. It referenced a significant personal loan, $50,000, Grandpa Ruiz had given his son, Mike Rossi, several years earlier to bail out a failing business venture, with a strict repayment deadline clearly noted. The codicil stated in unambiguous legal language that as this substantial loan remained wholly unpaid, well past the agreed-upon date. Despite Mike's subsequent business success, Mike Rossi's designated one-third share of the primary inheritance, specifically the proceeds from the sale of Grandpa Ruiz's house and his investment portfolio, was revoked. That revoked share was to be divided equally between Isabella and Elena. Effectively, Uncle Mike was cut out due to the unpaid debt. Leo stared at the document, his blood running cold. He clearly remembered the inheritance distribution 3 years ago. Uncle Mike had received his full third, a substantial sum close to $250,000 based on the final estate value mentioned in later documents in the folder, which meant this amendment, legally signed and witnessed, had somehow been ignored, or more chillingly, concealed during the probate process. Who had handled the estate paperwork? His mother, Isabella, had been the primary contact, the executor named in the original will before the amendment. A wave of nausea hit Leo. He thought of Uncle Mike's booming success, his expensive cars, his patronizing advice to Leo about fiscal responsibility. He thought of his mother's constant complaints about being short, her reliance on Leo's eventual support, while apparently sitting on knowledge of this discrepancy. Had she known? Had she actively helped her brother conceal the amendment to cheat her own sister, Elena, out of her rightful larger share? And perhaps ensure Mike remained the wealthy, successful brother she could boast about? The implications were sickening. Leo quickly took clear photos of every page of the will and the codicil with his phone, backing them up instantly to a secure cloud drive. He carefully placed the original documents back in the folder, slid it deep into the bottom of the box, and pushed the box back into the closet, his mind reeling. He felt like he'd stumbled upon a dark family secret far uglier than just chronic favoritism. He didn't know what to do with the information. Confronting his mother or uncle felt impossible, dangerous even. Aunt Elena lived across the country. He barely knew her. So he buried the knowledge, letting it simmer beneath his own daily struggles with the layoff and job hunt, a toxic undercurrent to his already strained family relations. Then came the birthday invitation. His cousin Sophia Rossi, Uncle Mike's daughter, surprisingly down to earth and one of the few relatives who treated Leo with genuine kindness, called him a week before his 27th birthday. "Leo, hey, what are you doing next Saturday?" she asked cheerfully. Probably scrolling Indeed," Leo replied wryly. Sophia laughed. "Nope, you have plans." "The family," she said, a slight hesitation in her voice that Leo now recognized as navigating known territory, "wants to take you out for your birthday. Mom and Dad, Isabella and Robert, and Uncle Mike thought it would be nice, you know, cheer you up while you're between jobs. That Italian place near Kierland Commons? Saturday, 7 p.m.? Leo's stomach clenched. A dinner with Uncle Mike and his parents? After months of feeling like a failure in their eyes? It sounded less like a celebration and more like an intervention or a pity party. "Sophia, I don't know." "Oh, come on, Leo," she insisted, her tone genuinely warm. "It'll be fun. Get you out of the apartment, please. For me?" Sophia's kindness was hard to resist. Reluctantly dread mingling with a sliver of foolish hope that maybe things would be different, Leo agreed. He arrived at the bustling Italian restaurant exactly at 7, dressed in his best interview clothes, clean dark jeans, a button-up shirt, feeling intensely self-conscious. They were already seated at a large round table in the center of the noisy dining room. Robert and Isabella, Sophia looking bored, and Uncle Mike Rossi holding court, telling some loud story about closing a business deal, already on his second glass of expensive red wine. Sophia waved him over, her smile genuine but slightly strained. Leo slid into the empty seat beside Sophia, forcing a smile. The dinner started predictably. Awkward small talk. Robert immediately launched into questions about his job search, each query laced with subtle criticism. "Still no leads, huh? Market's tough when you don't have practical skills." Isabella sighed about how worried she was. Sophia offered unsolicited, unhelpful advice about networking. Uncle Mike delivered patronizing pronouncements about resilience and paying your dues, clearly directing them at Leo while implicitly celebrating his own success. Leo mostly nodded, ate his pasta mechanically, and counted the minutes until he could escape. Then the waiter arrived carrying a large sheet cake, candles already lit. As the obligatory, slightly off-key happy birthday song began, Leo braced himself. Then he saw it. Scrawled across the white frosting in cheerful, mocking blue and pink icing were the words, "Oops!" Still the disappointment. The singing faltered as people noticed. A horrified silence fell over the table, broken only by Uncle Mike letting out a loud, booming laugh. Sophia snickered behind her hand. Robert looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Isabella had a tight, disapproving frown, but it seemed directed more at the tackiness of the joke than its cruelty. Sophia Rossi looked utterly mortified, whispering, "Oh my God, Leo, I had no idea." Leo stared at the cake, at the 5 insulting words summarizing his entire existence within this family. The blood drained from his face. The familiar shame, the hurt, the years of quiet endurance. It all vanished, replaced by a sudden blinding surge of cold, crystalline rage. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He simply stood up slowly, deliberately. He leaned across the table slightly, directly towards his laughing Uncle Mike. His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly quiet, audible only to those at the table. "Speaking of disappointments, Uncle Mike," he said, meeting his uncle's suddenly wary gaze, "I know about the money." He paused, letting the words land. "Grandpa Ruiz's amendment, the one you conveniently forgot about." He watched the color drain from Mike Rossi's face, saw the flicker of panic in his eyes, saw his mother Isabella gasp beside him. Then, without another word, without looking at anyone else, Leo Martinez turned and walked steadily out of the restaurant, leaving the offensive cake, the stunned silence, and the wreckage of his toxic family behind him. The bomb had been dropped. Leo Martinez walked out of the Italian restaurant into the warm Phoenix night, leaving the wreckage of his birthday dinner behind him. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the potent cocktail of adrenaline and years of suppressed anger finally unleashed, however obliquely. His phone immediately began buzzing in his pocket. Isabella, Robert, undoubtedly Uncle Mike already, but he ignored it, silencing the ringer as he got into his car. The cryptic toast, the reference to Grandpa Ruiz's amendment, the fuse had been lit. Now he just had to wait for the explosion and ensure the shrapnel hit the right targets. Back in the quiet solitude of his apartment, the first thing Leo did was compose a carefully worded email to his aunt Elena Garcia in California. He explained how he had stumbled upon their grandfather's will and the previously unknown codicil months ago while sorting through old family papers. He detailed the scene at the birthday dinner, the constant dismissal, the humiliating cake, and finally, his public but veiled reference to the amendment directed at Mike and Isabella. He attached the clear, time-stamped photos he had taken of every page of the will and the crucial codicil. He kept the tone factual, respectful towards his aunt, simply presenting the information he had discovered. He hit send, feeling a profound sense of releasing a burden he shouldn't have been carrying alone. Aunt Elena called him the very next morning, her voice tight with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and cold fury. "Leo," she began, her voice trembling slightly, I just read your email, saw the documents, that amendment. I had absolutely no idea. Mike always assured me Grandpa settled that old business debt privately years before he passed. And Isabella, she handled everything as executor, told me the will was straightforward, just a simple 3-way split." Her anger began to build. That means Mike received nearly $250,000 that rightfully belonged to me and Isabella? And Isabella knew? She let her own brother cheat her sister? Leo confirmed the details quietly. Elena was silent for a long moment, then her voice turned steely. "Thank you, Leo. Thank you for having the courage to bring this to light. They won't get away with this. My lawyers will be hearing about this today." True to her word, things moved swiftly. Elena Garcia, financially secure herself and outraged by the betrayal, engaged a top-tier probate litigation firm in California known for handling complex inheritance disputes. Within days, strongly worded letters of inquiry, citing the newly discovered codicil and demanding a full accounting of the estate distribution, were sent via certified mail to both Uncle Mike Rossi and Isabella Martinez, as the former executor who oversaw the allegedly fraudulent probate. The letters explicitly mentioned potential legal action for probate fraud, concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty if a satisfactory resolution wasn't reached immediately. The panicked calls to Leo's phone, which he continued to ignore, intensified, now likely fueled by genuine legal fear rather than just outrage at his dinner party behavior. Cousin Sophia Rossi became his reluctant conduit for information, texting him brief, stressed updates. "Sophia, Dad is losing it. Lawyers calling constantly. He's yelling at Grandma Isabella nonstop, blaming her for not handling the paperwork better." "Sophia, Grandma Isabella apparently came over sobbing last night, saying Dad Mike is threatening her, trying to make it all her fault as executor. Uncle Robert is useless, just wringing his hands. Aunt Sophia, Leo's sister, is furious at you for starting trouble. Sophia. Her dad's lawyer is talking about potential fraud charges if Aunt Elena pushes this to court. He looks scared, Leo. Really scared. Isabella managed to get a message through using a different relative's phone number, which Leo hadn't yet blocked. Leonardo, you need to call this off. Think about what you're doing. This bitterness will tear the family apart forever. Elena doesn't even need that money. Can't you just let old secrets lie? For your grandfather's memory. Leo read the manipulative plea, the invocation of his grandfather's memory by the very people who had likely defrauded his last wishes, and felt only cold resolve. He deleted the message and blocked the new number. Uncle Mike tried a different tactic, sending a vaguely threatening email from his corporate account. Leo, this unfortunate family misunderstanding seems to have escalated unnecessarily due to your recent actions. I trust you understand that pursuing these baseless allegations could have unforeseen consequences for everyone involved, perhaps even impacting future career prospects in related fields. I strongly advise you to encourage your Aunt Elena to resolve this matter discreetly. Leo immediately forwarded the email with its thinly veiled threat directly to Aunt Elena's lawyers. Faced with irrefutable documentary evidence, the signed and witnessed codicil, Leo's testimony about finding it, the potential testimony of Grandpa Ruiz's original lawyer confirming the amendment's existence, and the very real threat of public probate fraud litigation, which could lead to criminal charges and professional ruin for Mike and significant penalties for Isabella. The Rossi Martinez front crumbled faster than Leo expected. Sophia texted him about 3 weeks later. It's over. Dad and Grandma settled with Aunt Elena out of court yesterday. Had to sign ironclad NDAs, but sounds like Dad has to pay Elena back the full amount plus interest plus all her legal fees. He had to sell his lake house and leverage part of his business. He's devastated. Grandma had to contribute a huge chunk, too. Uncle Robert is furious about that. They're barely speaking. Leo felt a quiet wave wash over him. Not triumph, but a profound sense of justice served. Not for himself, though the vindication was undeniably satisfying, but for his grandfather, whose clear intentions had been ignored, and for Aunt Elena, who had been cheated by her own siblings. Around the same time, Leo landed a new job, a graphic design position in a promising tech startup in Scottsdale, offering better pay and more creative freedom than his previous role. It felt like the universe finally was aligning in his favor. He focused on his new job, his new life. He maintained friendly contact with Sophia, who seemed relieved the ordeal was over and respected Leo for his quiet strength. He had occasional warm phone calls with Aunt Elena, building a tentative connection based on shared truth and mutual respect for Grandpa Ruiz. He didn't hear directly from his parents or Uncle Mike again. He knew through Sophia's occasional reluctant updates that the fallout was ongoing. Uncle Mike's business facing financial strain, his parents' relationship deeply fractured, Sophia still complaining about Leo ruining everything. He felt a distant sadness for the brokenness, but no guilt. He hadn't caused the rot. He had merely exposed it to the light. One evening, sitting on the small balcony of his new Phoenix apartment, watching the desert sunset paint the sky, Leo reflected on the journey. The years of feeling like a disappointment, the sting of that birthday cake, the shock of discovering the secret, the anxiety of the confrontation, the quiet satisfaction of the outcome. It hadn't been about revenge. Not really. It had been about refusing to accept their narrative anymore. It had been about honoring his grandfather's truth and enabling justice for his aunt. It had been about finally choosing himself, his own worth, over their ingrained dysfunction. The disappointment label, once a heavy burden, now felt like a discarded costume. He was just Leo Martinez, building his own future, finally free. This story underscores the corrosive impact of hidden family secrets and long-term scapegoating. It highlights that true strength often lies not in enduring mistreatment silently, but in having the courage to expose the truth, even when it's painful. While confronting family betrayal is difficult, doing so can be a necessary act of self-preservation and can lead to unexpected justice for others who were wronged. Ultimately, finding peace and self-worth sometimes requires definitively breaking free from toxic family dynamics and reclaiming one's own narrative, proving that one's value is inherent and not defined by the distorted perceptions of others.